What is lolicon? Lolicon is a term for people who enjoy females who are little girls or characters that are childlike and typically prepubescent in figure, so basically underage girls. It's stated this way to basically explain away characters that are obviously children, but they're 1,000 years old. Even though this phrase is from Japan, it actually originates from the 1995 novel called Lolita, a horror story surrounding the obsession with a man named Hubert. I think that's how you pronounce it. If I mispronounce it, don't give a shit. And a 12-year-old girl named Dolores. The book's narrative is written in the point of view of Hubert. He marries a woman named Charlotte for the sole purpose of getting closer to Dolores, the 12-year-old girl. Charlotte dies after being struck by a car. The death is argued to be the fault of Hubert because after discovering his diary entries speaking about how much he hates her and actually really loves her daughter, she unknowingly runs out into traffic looking for him and gets struck by a vehicle. Obviously, after finding out about this death, it is great news because now there's nothing stopping him from getting closer to Dolores, so he takes custody of Dolores and now he can have his way with her. And that's basically the book, and it's terrible and awful, and it's a very awful story. For some reason, someone read the book and said, you know what, that guy, that predator, that's me for real. So what's Shotokan? Because we have lolicon, what's Shotokan? Shotokan is the male version of lolicon and the interest in shotas. The term for little boys instead of little girls. The term's origin isn't nearly as horrid as loli or lolicon. It comes from a character from the 1965 manga Tetsuijin. I'm not going to pretend I pronounce that very well. 28 Go, also known as Iron Man 28, it was renamed for obvious reasons in the future. The main character is a 12-year-old boy named Shitoro, and the plot isn't anything like Lolita. Obviously, it's just about a little boy and his giant fighting robot. There's nothing controversial about it. So what's Kodokan? Because most people are familiar with the terms lolicon and Shotokan. So what's this third term? It's basically a combination of both terms because it comes from the Japanese word for child, which is kodomo. It is the DL way of saying you're into kids, basically, because lolicon and Shotokan is super well known. What's not well known is Kodokan. Experience growing up with these terms, I obviously have my innocence. I didn't think of this in an inappropriate way. I just assumed it meant flat-chested women and twinks, not children. Just goes to show my innocence in the topic. The claim is that these things are okay because it's fiction and there's no real victims, and it's not realistic enough to be harmful. That it's only fantasy, and now who does that sound like?
Would you ever have two guys all over you?
It's just, like I said, fantasy type
What
things.
would you do with
I've had that fantasy in the back of my head.
fantasy?
In the United States, artwork that sexualizes children is considered illegal. Even though people use the whole tourist or Western argument, yet in 2013, the U.S. State Department described Japan as the international hub for the production and trafficking of child pornography. They only banned child pornography in 1999, by the way. So, country that's been known for its leniency towards sexual crime should not be dick righted. I'm so sorry. Federally in the United States is deemed legally obscene. It's a chargeable offense. It's morally unethical because it normalizes the sexualization, exploitation, and violation of children. It lacks artistic, political, and literary value. There's also the fact that artists can and will use references of real people to create their work. So the whole, quote-unquote, no real victims argument is very silly. There's the issue that paraphilia is involved in this topic, paraphilic disorders, heavily. I have to explain why it's wrong to enable a mental illness. These people are very likely to offend on their compulsions and very unlikely to seek treatment. And after speaking to multiple victims, artwork can and has been used to groom children. This video is condemning the depiction of children in this manner regardless of what you wish to call yourself, to be cute or whatever, on a legal, medical, and moral level. Defenders will argue it is free speech and only harmless fantasy. These ideas are delusions. A lot of people will say it's not a crime, it's only pixels on a screen. You're trying to protect a fictional character. Why don't you go help some real kids? That's literally the same argument as there's kids starving in Africa. You can address all issues one at a time. Just because there's way worse things happening in the world does not mean this is not worth talking about. That is foolish. It's giving that one person in high school that's trying to outdo you in their trauma. U.S. federal law criminalizes certain lolicon material or similar works. The main thing I'll reference is the 2003 Protection Act. This legislation was in response to the Supreme Court's ruling in 2002 in the Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition, which invalidated parts of a previous child protection law. It was basically the government arguing with itself. They claimed the ban of virtual imagery of children was unconstitutional and a violation of the First Amendment. It was a 6-3 in favor of Ashcroft. Reason being, the court was treating virtual children and real children as the same, when in reality there needed to be a distinction between the two. That's why the 2003 Protection Act, which is an addition and moderation to the Child Pornography Protection Act of 1996, it explains the difference, but it makes it clear it's still a crime, just a different kind of crime, all with the agreeable goal of protecting children. This was passed 413 to 8 in the House. The act targets the legal definition of obscene. The legal definition of obscene. Obscene visual representation of abuse of children. In the United States, the legal definition of obscenity or obscene is established by the Miller test, a 3-part standard created by the Supreme Court in 1973 case, Miller versus California. Any material ruled legally obscene is completely unprotected, meaning it is not constitutionally protected, it's not a right. The test is meant to judge the work for its overall value and based on its entirety versus a small part or segment. If the material meets all 3 criterias, it can be prohibited or regulated by the government without violating the First Amendment. But this is only for the distribution and sale of it, of course. It's considered legal to have privately if you wished, as long as you're not sharing it with anybody, that's fine. Privately is the key word because a lot of you people are not privately doing any of this. The 3 tests are, would the average person like it? Is it shameful? Is it unhealthy? Does it have a morbid interest in sex, accessory functions, or nudity? The second test is whether the work depicts sexual conduct in an offensive way. And the last but most important is if the work has any literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Basically, if the work is considered obscene, the production with the intent to distribute, receive, or possess is considered illegal. It applies to any visual depictions of a minor engaging in sexually explicit conduct that is obscene, depicts image of what appears to be a minor engaging with graphic bestiality, sadistic or masochistic abuse, intercourse, and lacks serious literary, artistic, political, and scientific value. This includes any artwork like cartoons, drawings, and paintings. And sculptures. I would argue that lolicon falls into the legal definition of obscene. I personally hate the fan service specifically involving high schoolers in anime, but y'all are safe because of its value. It's more with the hentai, which is a word for anime porn or any cartoon porn of minors. It is insanely offensive and serves no value other than sexual gratification. I can cite several criminal defense attorneys that will discourage the distribution and sale of such kind of work because you can be looking at felony charges. The question is whether possessing lolicon in the United States is legal. The answer is no. As a result of the Protect Act of 2003, lolicon meets the federal criteria for child pornography. If you are caught in possession of lolicon or shotacon, you can face federal criminal charges and significant prison time if convicted. Penalties ranging from 5 to 20 years in jail, by the way. Even with the whole no real victim argument, the law treats it as a threat to children, and there is a distinction made between the two, but it's treated as a crime just as child pornography would be. The biggest part that people seem to gloss over is the mental health side of things. People who are lolicons or whatever stupid name they give themselves suffer from a paraphilic disorder. And like I've mentioned in several other videos, there are 8 main categories for it. Voyeuristic disorder, an intense arousal from observing an unsuspecting person who is nude, undressing, or engaging in sexual activity. This can also include secretly surveilling people in bathrooms or taking upskirt photos of unsuspecting parties. Exhibitionist disorder, arousal from exposing oneself to an unsuspecting person, like the people flash you, that's them. Voyeuristic disorder, the arousal from touching or rubbing against a non-consenting person, often in crowds. So like the groping and all that stuff on trains, that stereotype, that's that. Fetishistic disorder, arousal from non-living objects, specific materials like leather, plastic, or shoes, or highly specific non-genital body parts like feet. Transvestic disorder, arousal from cross-dressing, often with distress or impairment, often confused with transgenderism, but it's not the same thing at all. Gender dysphoria is not a paraphilic disorder. Sexual masochism disorder, an arousal from being humiliated, beaten, bound, or made to suffer. The key thing, it's not just regular, fun play. It's actually dangerous, harmful situations, like bad. Like they could die. You know what I mean? Sexual sadism disorder, arousal from inflicting physical or psychological suffering on another person. Suffering. Key thing between these two, it's the consent part that you have to understand. They don't mention consent, remember that. Pedophilic disorder, sexual attraction to prepubescent children, obviously non-consenting, don't need to state that. It's always considered disordered if acted upon or causing distress. Aside from the obvious legality of most of the categories here, the main takeaway is that these disorders are diagnosed based on the inability to live a normal life, the inability to get aroused without these fetishes in question, the risk of harm to others themselves. These compulsions are a part of their everyday life. It just takes over their thoughts. You know what I mean? Shotacon, lolicon, Kotakon, whatever the fuck you want to call it, they fall into the pedophile category, obviously. And it's not just fictional, like people claim, because in the definition of these terms, it doesn't specify that it specifically has to be fictional. Not once. Not meant to be only about little anime characters, because that would be a fallacy. Research is a bit skewed about pedophiles and their disorder, mainly due to most of the research being gathered from convicted offenders and are court mandated to seek help. Due to this factor, doctors worry about how effective the treatment actually is because the treatment is involuntary. The patients are more likely to lie about the effectiveness of the treatment. These individuals are described as having poor impulse control, taking testosterone to circumvent castration because it causes low sex drive, and are very likely to act on their compulsions again, and just in general. People who have offended typically have other illegal based disorders, though. That's why they're considered more dangerous. Majority of pedophiles don't just have pedophilia. I'm also going to address the elephant in the room, which is non-offending pedophiles. Science proves, and this I say this jokingly, but I'm going to actually address it. Science proves that people who've offended versus people who have claimed to not have offended have completely different brain scans, so it shows that there's different stuff going on in their head. They're different types of people, completely. The key thing referenced in the research is prevention and intervention. Getting someone with the illness treatment as soon as possible is seen as beneficial. I can't disagree with that. You must avoid triggers, though. Break the cycle of fantasy, reinforcement, and not engage with anything normalizing the illness. I know some freaks would probably get excited from me even mentioning this, but remember, non-offending pedos do not draw inappropriate images of kids. Fantasize about them being violated or kidnapped. Do not create any scenarios where they're being harmed by their own parents or siblings. Or write any literature that sexualizes them. These are considered a gateway to real offenses. Just like how, they say weed's a gateway drug. Literally. It's not a coping skill that people pretend it is. It reinforces the compulsions rather than redirecting. Do not let people online fool you. No therapist would ever recommend drawing it, because I'm tired of hearing the stupid take online. It's anti-medicine, anti-science, to even think of such an illogical argument. Because what I can see is like, oh, I'm drawing something that happened to me. I'm drawing what happened to me. Sure, that's fine, but it shouldn't be a romanticization or actual glorification of what happened. That should just be common sense, because it's like you're supposed to depict it as bad, not as a cool, fun, sexy experience. I would also like to address how art is made in general, which most artists will understand, and for the normies, I'll explain it to you. For some reason, people who produce or enjoy this kind of content like to pretend that art is drawn in some sort of vacuum. Most artists use references and encourage doing so. It's almost impossible to draw things from memory or have never seen it ever, unless it's photographic or from repetition. It still involves a reference. My concern here is that these so-called artists are using real images of children or real exploitation of them. Because how the fuck do you know what kid is? How do you know what that looks like? Let's be so for real right now. You can't sit there like, oh yeah. No! No. That's why I say all the time, parents should be very careful about how they post their children. You know, when I see kids online, I get scared. As much as I want to enjoy the FOMO of a family with kids and all that stuff, I just get really scared. I'm thinking, like, is there a freak out there looking at this and happy? People are evil. And your child might just be being a child existing, and someone is sexually saving their pictures or worse. I know people will say it's only bad when the artwork is based on real children, and it's redundant because they'll say it's just pixels. So we've discussed how lolicon is illegal under the US federal law, because that's where we live, and other people live in other countries. I don't care about you. Goodbye. When it qualifies as obscene, and we've already discussed what obscene is by their legal definition. We also discussed how it's immoral because it objectifies the child body and childhood and normalizes pedophilic desires, fantasy, weakens our natural instinct to protect kids, reflects paraphilic mental health conditions in a light that it doesn't deserve. It's supposed to be seen as harmful, not as normal. And in my opinion, they probably a lot of the time rely on images of real children as artistic reference. We, as a society, we really need to reject the lie of it's just drawings, because they try to use arguments like video games and media in general. Anything involving a fetishistic paraphilic disorder is not comparable to GTA. I am tired of hearing this argument. Enough. No. Enough. One has value, one does not. Hope you understand that. Reject this. Reject. The harm is real. Children are real. It's not like we're talking about Venom or some other fictional character entity that no way in hell would ever exist. We're not talking about Olaf. It's also just a matter of staying consistent, in my opinion. If we condemn the quote-unquote specifically real exploitation of children, we should also reject its celebration in fictional spaces. Any hidden reliance on actual child photographs or the enabling of paraphilic disorders. We should not be anti-medicine. A lot of times, none of these people recommend therapy. I've seen people with these disorders say, deal with it how you see fit. Be contact or non-contact if you'd like. Like my video explains my stance on lolicons and anything similar because all these fucking names. No one can possibly change my mind on it. So y'all can argue with yourself in the comments and make yourselves feel good, but I don't agree with you and I don't like you. I think anyone who defends this is scum. I think you're degenerate. I think you're evil. And I would argue demonic, but I'm not religious. And keep an eye on them because I don't know, something a pedophile would say. This isn't something worth defending, guys. It's not like smoking cigarettes where it only endangers yourself. It poses a risk to everyone else in society. To the most weakest people in society, are kids. I've gotten people in comments saying minor adult relationships for the win. These people are not people you want to be affiliated with. I remember someone calling me a fat for not liking this stuff, and I'd rather be that than a what? Goodbye. Due to YouTube's rules on certain things, I will not be wishing death or harm to anyone in this video. Thank you for watching my video. Please support me in all my platforms. I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Tumblr, Threads, Blue Sky, Twitch, even fucking Pinterest, bitch. Also support me on Patreon. Everybody has been asking about my server, Lock-in Bestie. That's where you'll find it. Now I'll be thanking my loyal patrons. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Story Labs. Thank you, Sleepy Ember. Your support means so much to me. Thank you for spending your night with me. Hugs and kisses. Good night.